Bloomberg wrote this article where the headline was Americans like sharing bad economic news way too much. And the entire premise of the article was, oh no, we're not in rough economic times. There's no recession coming. But if you dummies keep sharing bad economic news, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you're going to thrust us into a recession because you're just not grateful enough for what Bidenomics has done for you. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's probably true that I share bad economic news more, but I also don't think that me sharing bad economic news is responsible for the current state of the economy. I think it has to do with printing a lot of money out of nothing and creating an economy that's just a house of cards. So anyway, I told you guys I wanted to ask Zach Abraham about that sentiment because I'll be fair, okay, maybe it does. Maybe sharing bad economic news actually does lead to a worse economy. So we have an expert on the show, so I figured I'd ask him. Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital. We sent the article to him to read and asked him to come on and share his perspective. Zach Abraham, welcome back to Undivided.
Oh, thanks for having me. Always look forward to it.
So are Americans just too obsessed with sharing bad economic news and we're to blame when things actually go south?
No, I think that people that don't make $500,000 to $1 million that live in the real world and have not spent their entire life and career in academic ivory towers that are actually impacted by negative economic news, I think those people like to share it. I think most people like to believe that their professional future and their financial future look good. But call me crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, is there anything to the assertion that if you have Americans on social media sharing a lot of bad economic news, that it might become a self-fulfilling prophecy and that people will hold off doing certain things that will ultimately hurt the economy?
So this is the funny part about the article. If that was happening, then why is there 4% consumer spending growth, right? I laugh at these articles because they collapse in on themselves. Okay, so let's get down to economic reality, okay? So first of all, when she goes, the economy's strong, there is no recession in sight. Unlike her, we've actually done the work on this, okay? So when you look at the history of recessions, every single time, without exception, you had a blowout GDP and consumer spending report the quarter before you went into recession. And it has to do with the business cycle, meaning when businesses see tough times coming, they liquidate goods at discounted prices. So GDP is like it's a very rudimentary way to say this, but GDP numbers are like a consolidation of transactions. So we can show that transactions have gone up a lot, but if the businesses were selling them at no profit, therefore selling them at artificially low prices. And the reason businesses do this is really simple. They want to get their capital out of the manufacturing cycle. If you see lower demand right around the corner, you just want to liquidate inventory and get as much capital on the side as possible. So what ends up happening is consumer spending jumps because they're buying things at 30% discounts, right? If they weren't discounted, you wouldn't see a surge in consumer spending. People can get articles in Bloomberg that work for the Federal Reserve and are PhD economists and still have absolutely zero idea what they're talking about. So when she says there's no recession right around the corner, look, she may end up being right. Nobody's got the answer. But what she cites as being the fact, it's ridiculous. When you read articles like this, to me, it really enforces or reinforces one of the biggest problems we have in this country and this economy at large is you have a bunch of people making decisions who are completely insulated and completely detached from what the average consumer and the average person and the average citizen is actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's a great point. When I read that headline, I'm like, it's kind of like, oh, woe is you, America. Stop being so negative. Negative Nancy's. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like people are struggling. But, we talked a few weeks ago about, okay, if there is a recession, which I hope that there's not, but if there is one, what are they going to blame it on in a presidential election year, right? Can you see this being a narrative, which is like, well, yeah, all the right-wing outlets were sharing all this bad news about the economy, and so it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm sure that some idiot will do. I mean, we have members of Congress stepping up to podiums and spewing anti-Semitic garbage right now. So I'm sure people will try to spin off any narrative they can. At the end of the day, the reality is somewhat simple. Okay, you spent 15 years stacking up debt to the ceilings on corporations, individuals, government the most, at the lowest interest rates in human history. And it resulted in, and I know this sounds crazy, right? But it resulted in the hottest inflation prints we've seen since the 70s. Okay, so then over the course of 18 months, you went on the highest and fastest rate hiking cycle in history. What do you think's going to happen? Right? Wait, Brandi, until you start seeing the defaults. We were looking at, they're starting to come through right now. So you just had an office building in San Francisco that was purchased in 2018 for $66 million. You just had it auctioned off for $15 million. Okay. Wow. For anybody keeping score at home, that's a 75% write down. It's actually almost an 80% write down. You just had a $1.2 billion skyscraper office building in Toronto that literally, it came up for refinance. The owner gave it back to the bank. They haven't even auctioned it off yet. He just walked away from a $1.2 billion building. Okay. These stories are going to come in fast and hard. And here's the other thing. It's really funny to watch her. She really, truthfully, I read that and I'm like, the only part of this makes sense is if she's working on the Biden reelection campaign. Nobody, including me, knows exactly what's going to happen. And anybody that says they do, that's the only person whose opinion we shouldn't listen to. But when you see articles like this, it's not subjective. She's just wrong. The things she's saying are wrong. This economy is not humming. We're looking at architectural billing and new permits for multi-housing and single. They are collapsing. Okay. So, I mean, everywhere we look, you are seeing things going south. So again, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be right, but I would bet a substantial sum that I am, because, this is how it always shakes out.
I think you make a really good point that anyone who claims to know or not know what's coming exactly for sure can't be trusted. And that's how she ends this article. The economy is strong. There's no recession in sight. That's not a question. That's not an equivocation. She is very calm. I'd like to have you and her in a little debate of some kind. I think that would be a lot of fun. Let's set it up.
Hey, you and me both. It just reminds me in 2006 of Ben Bernanke appearing before the House Judiciary Committee and saying that the issues in subprime are contained.
Yeah.
Not
so much. Zach Abraham, we appreciate it. And you have your final live webinar of the year coming up on November 16th. And so what can folks learn if they join? And it's free to sign up, by the way.
Yeah, just how differently we do things, how we actively manage portfolios and most importantly, in this period of time, manage risk. And, I'll just tell people, we are very conservatively positioned right now. We think you can make 5% risk-free on U.S. government bonds. That's a great deal. There's some other great companies out there that are not really subject to. Anyway, there's a lot of great places to put money right now. It's just not the places that people are thinking about. And we just believe, hey, if the worst story our clients have to tell over the next year and a half is that they could have made more money doing something else, then that's a result we can live with. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the story that a lot of people are telling. So I just think it's a great time to look into our risk management processes and, how we can drastically lower risk while actually increasing your upside return. And we just walk them through how we do it.
Yeah. And again, it's free. And so I think at the very least, getting a little bit of free advice from an expert is a good thing. So Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, we appreciate your time as always.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it.
So keep sharing that bad economic news if you want to.